We're going to start this evening, and we're going to have a public hearing for the Community Development Supplement Grant. So, welcome to the public hearing, Community Development Supplement Grant. The county has created a new competitive grant program, the Community Development Supplemental Grant, CDSG, beginning in 2017. Grants of up to $50,000 will be available to all communities in Cuyahoga County, as well as community development corporations within the county, which meet certain criteria. Activities that meet the CDBG requirements will be eligible, but they do not need to meet the low mod or slum blight objectives, allowing much more flexibility in our scope. The city is currently discussing various projects for which we may apply. At this time, I would ask members of the audience not affiliated with the City of Brooklyn to come up to the podium if they wish to make suggestions to the administration on ways this funding should be allocated if granted by the county. Please limit your prepared remarks to 5 minutes or fewer. And there is no one. Okay, if that be the case, I'd like to call this meeting of the Brooklyn City Council to order. Mary Jo, can you please call the roll?
Mary Belbeer.
She is absent this evening, excused.
Kevin Tansky.
Here.
Barb Politsky.
Here.
Ron Van Kirk.
Here.
Meg Ryan Shockey. Here. Andy Selhertz.
Here.
Kathy Pucci. Here.
At this time, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? After the pledge, please remain standing for prayer this evening by Pastor Folger of the Cleveland Baptist Church.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to say before we pray, we're very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you for the extending this honor, and Cleveland Baptist Church has a great history here with the City of Brooklyn, and we're just grateful to be part of the community. Let's pray together. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful tonight to bow our heads and humble our hearts in your presence. And Lord, we are thankful for this community. We're thankful for the long history our church has had on Tiedemann Road with the City of Brooklyn. And we're thankful, Father, for the fact that not only do we get to be here, but we get to be contributors to this community. We're thankful for our city's leadership. We're thankful for the mayor and the heads of every department. We're thankful for these council members tonight, Lord, who have the interests of our city at heart. We pray that as they go about their business tonight, Lord, that you'd help them in their decisions and choices. We pray for the City of Brooklyn, Lord, that you'd help it. And Lord, it's been some tough things going on in the economic realm and in other ways. And we just pray that you'd help our city leaders and the community to pull together. We're grateful, Father, for a nation where we can still bow our heads, we can still humble ourselves and publicly pray to you, acknowledging our need. And certainly, Father, there is a great need in all of our lives tonight. We ask these things, we pray them in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. You may be seated. The first item on our agenda this evening is the approval of minutes from the meeting held September 24th, 2018. Are there any comments or questions regarding those minutes?
May I be recognized?
Yes.
Just a few changes. Page 3, second paragraph, third line towards the right. Instead of I was well attended, it should read it was well attended. Next paragraph down under Councilwoman Politsky's comments, second line towards the right. Instead of form, it should be from. And the third line down further to the right, instead of take a change, it should be take a chance. And I believe that's it. So I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
To approve as amended, Kevin Tansky.
Yes.
Barb Politsky.
Yes.
Ron Van Kirk.
Yes.
Meg Ryan Shockey.
Yes.
Andy Selhertz.
Yes.
Kathy Pucci.
Yes.
The city's new board docs page is up and running. There is a link on the city's website under the City Council tab marked City Council Meetings. Agendas, legislation, and all the attachments will be available there. This board docs has been a long time in coming, and as the program has expanded throughout the city, it does promise to be a benefit for the city. I want to publicly thank Mary Jo Banish and Don Neal for their many hours of work to get this program off the ground. And it's already proven beneficial, and as it spreads throughout the city, it's going to be a benefit to all the residents of Brooklyn, making information easier to find and the meetings to go, hopefully, more smoothly and a lot less paper. And so thank you, Mary Jo, for all your work on that, and Don as well. At this time, we will have the public session. If anyone in the audience has anything to say for the good and welfare of the city of Brooklyn, please step forward, state your name and address, and you'll be recognized. Please remember to keep your comments to 5 minutes or fewer.
Good evening, everyone. Victor Ardito, 7439 Outlook Avenue. I'd bring up 2 points. I've mentioned this before regarding the way they're redoing all the streets now with bike lanes and everything. I'd really like to see somebody pass a thing across the state, wherever it's done, for any bicyclist, I would say maybe 18 and over, that has to buy a license plate to ride on the streets. For kids, we all grew up riding everywhere, which I have no problem, but millions of dollars being spent now for bicyclists, they should start sharing the cost also. Another point, I think they're finally doing South Amber, which is great. They did a lot of the cement work in some large patches, and I saw some markings on the cement, and I thought they're coming back to patch the rest of it, redo it. Well, they did come back and redo it. They patched it, so cut sections out. Instead of cement, there's asphalt in the bottom. Why didn't we do it all in concrete? To me, it's not as solid a base as concrete. I don't know, was it a shortcut to save some money? If so, is it going to last as long? Because concrete and asphalt are two different animals. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. We will then now move on with reports of committees, commissions, and boards. We'll start with the Finance Committee. We did meet this evening at 6:30. Just had a few items on the agenda. The first of which was Ordinance 2018-75, and this is up for third reading adoption this evening. This is to amend the Job Retention and Creation Grant with Inogen. And Inogen has asked the city to expand that grant as they are planning to add additional jobs than they originally thought. The new grant calls for now 500 jobs. I believe it was 240 or 260 originally, but it now calls for 500 full-time or full-time equivalent jobs to be created in the 3-year period. And the grant will be based upon the retention and creation of those jobs at the following schedule. Year 1, approximately a $6 million payroll for an estimated $45,000 grant. Year 2, a $14 million payroll with an $87,500 estimated grant. And year 3, a $20 million payroll with an estimated grant of $100,000. New to the agenda this evening is Resolution 2018-8. This is authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Cuyahoga County General Health District for health services for 2019 and 2020. And this contract provides health services during those 2 years at a cost of $52,941 for 19 and $60,871 for 2020. It will include all necessary medical, nursing, sanitary, laboratory, and such other health services as required by the statutes of Ohio. Just for reference, the 2008 contract amount was $46,016. And lastly was kind of a housekeeping item, Resolution 2018-9, and this is requesting the county fiscal officer to advance taxes from the proceeds of the 2018 tax levies pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, Section 321.34. We pass this every year, just authorizing us to get the tax money for the tax levies. Right, and that was it for finance. Oh, no, there were a couple other things actually. We mentioned at the last meeting, I think we did pass at the last meeting that we were going to go ahead and issue a PO for a new one-arm bandit garbage truck to be paid for next year. And Mr. Verba was contacted by the seller of that equipment. There's actually one that meets exactly our specs and actually has about $14,000 of additional equipment on it, actually already done and sitting in, I think he said North Royalton, that's where the dealership is there. And he's going to go out and take a look at it sometime this week. And if it does meet all the specs, we're going to go ahead and purchase that this year as opposed to having to wait the 8 or 9 months. The additional charges for the extra bells and whistles we will not have to pay for. We will stick with the original amount that we talked about at our last meeting. But it will be nice to get that back on the road, but get that on the road now to replace our older vehicle. So hopefully Mr. Verba will come back with some good news on that. All right, and the City Council will be meeting later on this month and then again in November to begin continue our discussions, I should say, for the 2019 budget as well. And our Finance Director has been working diligently to get up to speed on that, and so we'll continue that process later this month for our budget for 2019. All right, we will now move on with the other committees. We'll begin this evening with the Domestic Abuse Commission. Councilman Ryan Chucky.
Thank you. Tomorrow, the Domestic Abuse Commission will be meeting at 6 o'clock at the Fire Station Community Room. Then, this Thursday, October 11th, I will be talking to the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce about the Domestic Abuse Commission with some general information on the topic and how businesses and individuals can be supportive of our mission. If you would like to attend the noon lunch, visit the Chamber website at brooklynohiochamber.org. Tickets are $15 for members and $20 for non-members. Finally, the Domestic Abuse Commission will be collecting used clothing and new toiletries in honor of Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, which is occurring right now in October. There will be boxes in the police station lobby for donations to be dropped off between October 15th, which is a Monday, and Friday, October 26th. Please help us in raising goods for the city mission and the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. Thank you, and that ends my report.
Thank you. Next up is the Recreation Board, Councilman Tansky.
Thank you. The next Recreation Board meeting will be held on Monday, October 15th, in the Rec Center meeting room at 7 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Okay, next up is the Board of Zoning Appeals, Commissioner Colstar.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kern. The Board of Zoning Appeals will be meeting on Thursday, October 18th, 6 p.m. here in the Brooklyn City Hall Conference Room to hear the following request, both from Michael Christopher, one for a 2-foot variance to the minimum 3-foot required for an accessory structure to the side of the yard setback. Sorry, that didn't come out very well. Basically, this is a side yard setback requirement that is 3 feet, and he's requesting a 2-foot variance. The other variance is for a 1-foot. It's going to be a 1-foot variance to the minimum 3-foot required for the rear yard setback, and this is at 8914 Ansonia Avenue. That completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is the Planning Commission. We had our last the Planning Commissioning was held this past Thursday, October the 6th, I believe it was. And there were 2 requests that were at the meeting. It was a request from Cleveland Baptist Church for a freestanding sign at 4431 Tiedemann Road, and also a request from Brian Peters of Red Architecture for a conditional use for a drive-through in a light industrial district at 10325 Cascade Crossing. I was absent from this meeting as I was in Washington, D.C. with my senior government class, but both these items were approved by the Commission. The next Planning Commission meeting will take place on Thursday, November the 1st at 6:30 p.m. in the City Hall Conference Room, and all are welcome to attend. That is all for the committees, commissions, and boards. We'll now move on with our reports from Council. We begin this evening with Mr. Tansky.
Thank you. Brooklyn's Fall Festival, held on September 29th at Veterans Memorial Park, was a great success. Residents and their families spent the beautiful day in the park enjoying food, games, and socializing with their friends. We hope to keep the tradition going every year, as it is a wonderful way to bring summer to a close and begin the fall season. I hope everyone who came out had a good time. And just a question over to the mayor. Been getting more calls on Rodone with these dirt mounds that are still sitting on that school property. Do we have any update on where the school is moving to get these mounds removed?
May I be recognized? Mr. Colsard, were you able to get in touch with Dr. Glecka?
I have not yet.
I'm waiting for a response from the superintendent to follow up with the meeting. I did pass on the complaints that you received from the residents over there. He had not seen that yet.
I think he has, because he let me know about that.
I forwarded to him after the last meeting. So Dave and I talked at the staff meeting, and we were going to schedule a follow-up meeting with Dr. Glecka.
One other question, and Mr. Colsar gave me an answer. The contract that they had when they took down both schools, was it in the contract to remove those mounds or be hauled out of there under that original contract, and it was never done?
May I be recognized? I can't speak as to the contract, but it was not something that was in approved drawings to remain after the projects were completed. I can tell you that the scope had changed, and they had a larger plan to start with than they ended up doing. and it ended up remaining.
Okay, so can you please keep up with him, let me know where that's going, because
You're trying, yeah.
I talked to him and I haven't gotten when it was going to be done, the date, the time, just, they're looking at it. So, I appreciate it, thanks.
Is that everything? Good.
That's it.
Okay. Next up is Mrs. Splitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kirk. Good evening. The Fall Fest was a huge success, perfect weather, and I heard that the children had a great time. Thanks to all the dedicated city and staff and volunteers who made it happen. The Fall Parent-Teacher Conference will be this coming Thursday, October 11th, 2018, from 3:30 to 5:30, and again from 6:30 to 9 in each individual classroom. The school board meeting will be on October 16th at 6 p.m. in the media room. If you have any questions about the upcoming school levy, you may be interested in attending. I attended Coffee with the Mayor this past week. Several residents issues with parking on Marquardt Park during the soccer games. Chief Milkey has assured them that he will have more police presence during the games to address cars that block residents' driveways. On this past Friday evening, I attended an Ohio Flags of Honor memorial ceremony in Middlebrook Heights. This project travels the country and honors deceased veterans. The Ohio division of this program travels with 300 flags with the names of Ohio's men and women who have given their lives for our country. The last ceremony for 2018 will be at the Polish American Cultural Center at 6501 Lansing Avenue on Friday, October 12th. The opening ceremony is at 5 p.m. and the closing ceremony will be on Sunday, October 14th at 2 p.m. If you have never seen it, and I never have before last week, it is something to see. Now that I know about this project, I will update you on when the schedule for 2019 will be. It starts in May and goes on through October, weather permitting. Thank you very much, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Splitsky. Next up is Mrs. Meg Ryan Shockey.
Thank you. As others have mentioned, the Fall Fest occurred a couple weekends ago. It was wonderful to see so many residents and community members on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I want to thank all of Brooklyns staff, especially Mary Jo, Jill, and the service department for their efforts in making Fall Fest happen. It is events like these that remind me why Michael and I chose to live in this community. And then finally, voter registration for the 2018 general election ended today, which means tomorrow starts early voting. There are many important issues on the ballot, so please take the time to vote this general election. Election day is November 6th, and that ends my report.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Selkirk.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kirk. On Saturday, October 20th, Brooklyn Varsity Wrestling will be holding a fundraiser at the Hooley House from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at 10310 Cascade Crossing. Donation is $25 per person. There'll be 100 tickets available. It includes a buffet which includes wings, hunks, pizza, potato skins, mac and cheese, salad. They'll have a Chinese raffle, 50-50, sideboards. Fundraiser is for the varsity wrestling program. Tickets can be purchased through Coach Taylor Smith at 216-485-8149 or Coach Raymond Mass at 216-548-3098. Any wrestling parent or at the door at the day of the event. They are hoping for more alumni to come out and support them. Wrestlers and non-wrestlers, please come support the 2019 fundraiser and season. All fundraiser money raised goes into the Brooklyn Booster account for student athletes towards apparel and gear. Second thing, on Tuesday, October 30th, starting probably around 6:30 p.m., judges will be out for this year's Halloween house decorating contest. There will be, third item is there will be a wing ding night at Bleachers at 6855 Ridge in Parma on Friday, November 9th. It's for the post-prom committee. Costs $25 per person. If you have any questions or you want to get tickets, please contact Kelly McGinney Supik. And the final thing, coming up this weekend on Friday, October 12th from 6 to 9 p.m. It's a family fall fest held by Cleveland Baptist Church. There'll be food, drinks, face painting, inflatables, games, snow cones, cotton candy, hay rides. It's a 100% free event, and it'll be over on Tiedemann. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Selhertz. Next up is Mrs. Pucci.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank Pastor Folger for being with us this evening for the opening prayer, and also thank Mr. Ardito for his comments. I attended both of the financial meetings relating to the schools, including the meeting that was hosted last evening by Brooklyn Acres. And I would like to thank Brooklyn Acres for hosting this event. There was some talk after the first meeting at the schools that the time, which was 6 p.m., was a little challenging for some people who are trying to get home from work, that was a little bit too early for them. So Brooklyn Acres offered to host an additional meeting last evening, which is at 7 p.m. So I'd like to thank them for that. Issue 3 is the school issue. Please make sure you get all of the information that you need to make an informed decision. And actually, voter registration closes at 9 p.m. tonight. So if there's anybody who needs to register or change their address, you can still do that online or even by the paper document and turn it into the library by 9 o'clock. And as Councilwoman Meg Ryan Shockey mentioned, the early voting does start tomorrow, and there are 2 options, either by mail or in person down at the Board of Elections. I have a Safe Routes to School report. We had the Family Fun Walk 5K on Saturday, September 29th. The weather was perfect, and it was a very good event. I'd like to thank all the volunteers, especially our leader, Susie Marquis. And a special thanks I'd like to mention to all the student volunteers. After the event begins and while we're waiting for the walkers or runners to return to the park, I've had an opportunity over the past few years to get to know some of the volunteers, because some of them volunteer for it every single year. And we have some really wonderful, wonderful students who really love growing up and going to school in a small community where everybody knows everybody, and they don't let you slip through the cracks. So thank you to the student volunteers who help us every year for this event. The schools were also notified today that they did receive a $7,000 non-infrastructure grant from ODOT to continue funding these type of events through Safe Routes to School. And Mayor, do you know if we heard anything on the infrastructure grant today?
We did not.
Okay, because we're still waiting to hear on the infrastructure grant that we submitted. I'd also like to thank all of our city workers and volunteers who contributed to Fall Fest. Thank goodness it was good weather that day, and it was a very fun event, and I know a lot of people really appreciate having community events that bring us together. And Mr. Kolsar, if you could clarify something, because I think we kind of keep going round and round about this. So is it the city's position that the mounds of dirt relating to the demolition of the schools should be removed? Or, is that like something that we can require, or is that a tough question?
It is, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
If we're
but there seems to be some confusion.
It would be gone already.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we could press the issue, definitely. We could cite them, but I think we're trying to be good partners with the school and come to a solution for it.
And I believe that's the appropriate path to take.
Yeah.
I just know, obviously there's a lot of residents talking about this, and I know, we've tried to address the concerns that there isn't anything hazardous and all that. But I just, I think we never really got a definitive, should they be removed? So, okay, thank you. This week is Fire Prevention Week. The theme this year is look, listen, and learn. Be aware, fire can happen anywhere. So please, during this week, check your smoke detectors and your CO detectors. If you have the older models that require that you change the batteries every year, please make sure you change them. And if you have the newer models with the lithium batteries that last for 10 years, make sure you look at the date on them, because it does kind of get away from you, and that time can pass quickly. So we just want to make sure that all of our residents have in good working order the fire detector, smoke detectors, and CO detectors. And I believe that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pucci. As I mentioned a second ago, this last week I had the opportunity to travel once again to our nation's capital. It was an interesting time this last week in D.C. with a lot of activity going on there, and I got to take our seniors there this year. And every time I go there, we see a lot of things. We tour a lot of museums, and every year it's the memorials that always speak to me the most, and in particular the Vietnam War Memorial. I have a personal connection there. My uncle served in Vietnam, lost a very dear friend there. And so every time we go there, no matter how crazy it is in Washington, D.C., it is very nice to reflect and once again to thank our veterans for all that they do for us each and every day, and visiting Arlington as well. And so if you have never been to D.C., or it's been a long time, I would encourage you to go. Spend some time there, and it really kind of puts a lot of things back into perspective. I do want to echo the sentiments of the other council members for the Fall Fest. My son, who is 4, absolutely enjoyed himself. In fact, was not the happiest of guys when it was time to leave. But our youngest, who is 3 months old, decided it was time to eat, and so we had to go. And but everything was great. The weather was absolutely beautiful. So Mayor, you and your staff are to be commended. It was a wonderful event, and so I look forward to coming to that in years to come. I did want to also, Mr. Ardito, I don't know the answer to your question, but I will find out the answer through the city, and I will get back to you on that. I wanted to talk this evening. Ms. Meg Ryan Shockey and Mrs. Pucci talked about voting, and I do want to talk about issue 1. And there's not been a lot said about it, but I want to inform the voters of what exactly this language is. It's a very long issue that's on the ballot, and I'm going to take the time to read through it so that voters can be informed when they go to vote. Issue 1, this is the ballot language. It says, quote, to reduce penalties for crimes of obtaining, possessing, and using illegal drugs. It is a proposed constitutional amendment. It is a proposed initiative petition. In other words, this was not done by the legislature, this was done by citizens. It only requires 1,000 signatures to get a petition on the ballot for a constitutional amendment. And this would actually add a new section 12 to Article 15 of the Constitution of the state of Ohio. And it would include these things, and there's several of them, but I am going to take the time to read them. Number 1, it would require sentence reductions of incarcerated individuals, except individuals incarcerated for murder, rape, or child molestation, be up to 25%. if the individual participates in rehabilitative work or educational programming. Secondly, it would mandate that criminal offenses of obtaining, possessing, or using any drug, such as fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD, and other controlled substances, can no longer be classified as a felony, only as a misdemeanor. Fentanyl, as I'm not real familiar with drugs, but I did look this up, is approximately 50 times more powerful than heroin. And by possessing that, you would only be classified as a misdemeanor, no longer a felony. Number 3, it would prohibit jail time as a sentence for obtaining, possessing, or using such drugs until an individual's third offense within 24 months. Number 4, it allows an individual convicted of obtaining, possessing, or using any such drug prior to the effective date of the amendment to ask a court to reduce the conviction to a misdemeanor, regardless of whether the individual has completed his sentence. So those that have already been sentenced can seek to have their sentence reduced. Next, it require any available funding based on projected savings, and those projected savings would be reduced amounts of population in prison, to be applied to state administered rehabilitation programs and crime victim funds. And lastly, it would require a graduated series of responses, such as community service, drug treatment, or jail time for minor non-criminal probation violations. I want to go back and talk about that fentanyl for a second. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill the average person. In order for you to only receive a misdemeanor, you can be holding on to up to 19 grams of fentanyl, and it still be considered a misdemeanor, and you'd have to be arrested twice for that before the third violation. That is what this new amendment would do. This amendment is opposed by the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, Maureen O'Connor. She wrote a very detailed article. It's very easy to find online. I want to quote a couple things that she said. She says, quote, "A superficial reading of issue 1 could lead voters to see it as a thoughtful, compassionate, and reasonable response to a difficult and intractable problem. It seems so until you peel back its layers and see it will have catastrophic consequences for our state," end quote. She goes on to say again, "If issue 1 passes, Ohio might have some of the most lenient drug crime laws in the nation. We easily could become a magnet for substance abuse activity because there will be, in effect, very little consequence to engaging in such behavior," end quote. She goes on to say, quote, "To make matters worse, issue 1 would freeze our criminal drug offense laws in time. It expressly mandates that its provisions be implemented based on the laws in effect on January 1, 2018. In other words, our General Assembly couldn't, by passing a statute, fix all that is wrong with issue 1. Our elected leaders could not pass laws to contradict issue 1, laws meant to keep us safe. Another constitutional amendment will be necessary to repeal or modify the issue 1 constitutional amendment. This would take another statewide election." So in other words, this is not just some law the legislature has passed. This will actually go into our Constitution, which obviously supersedes any work done by the legislature. Next, she says, "The proponents of issue 1 seek to address a very real problem in our criminal justice system, the impact of substance abuse on our society and our criminal justice system. But by taking a hammer to that problem, the proponents have set Ohio on a dangerous course to adopting some of the most lenient drug laws in the country. It would limit the ability of the state to confront very real dangers now and in the future in battling substance abuse," end quote. Lastly, she says, quote, "Issue 1 may be well-intentioned in design, but its passage would gravely endanger Ohioans. It would be devastating in effect," end quote. Prosecutors, sheriff's offices, police departments all across the country are adamantly opposed to issue 1. One sheriff, the Butler County Sheriff, here in Butler County, Ohio, said this, quote, "Issue 1 is not going to empty the prisons out. It is not going to empty the jails out. What it is going to do is kill more people," end quote. So those are the facts on issue 1. And there hasn't been a whole lot of information. For an interesting read, find out who's funding it. I won't go into that this evening. But I would encourage residents to be informed on this, on issue 1, and to vote whether you think this should be added to our Constitution or not. And that is all I have this evening. We'll now move on with the mayor's report.
Thank you, Council President Van Kirk. I just have a couple things tonight. As Ron already mentioned, Board Docs is live as of today, so if you ever want to check out what City Council is receiving in the packets, you can scroll through on the agenda, click on the documents and open up those documents or follow along right in the audience. This is the program that the school board is already using, so if you regularly attend school board meetings, it should be easy to pick up on this as well. As for Fall Festival, I think everyone hit on the thank yous. It was a great day. I also wanted to add in thank yous to Giant Eagle for offering free drinks to our residents, Mark's for the huge discounts they gave us on pumpkins, Polaris Career Center for bringing free pastry for residents. I think there were 12 trays of cookies. And then Home Depot for coming out and doing a kids table. That was a big hit. Other things I want to speak of is a couple of events going on. We have the fire open house this Saturday, so please remember that if you have kids, grandkids, just want to come out or you want to get your blood pressure read. The open house is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. The firefighters will be doing tours, CPR demonstrations, safety tips, the mobile fire safety house, and refreshments will be provided, so come on over to the firehouse on Saturday. Also, Brooklyn Point, the assisted living facility that was built on Northcliffe, is having their grand opening on the 18th at 4 p.m. And last, on October 20th, our service department will be open. That's a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if there's some things that you've been wanting to drop off, specifically maybe cans of paint, varnishes or pesticides, gasoline, stuff that you just don't want to put out in the normal trash day. This is a great time to go drop it off. One of the things that we heard with the survey is maybe more Saturday hours in our service department. So if you recall, we did a shred day earlier in the spring, as well as had the service department open. I think we had 75 residents come and drop things off. So we're hoping that you find this useful to be able to come on a Saturday. Again, that is from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, October 20th. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss, I keep talking about the master plan. I want to keep everyone updated during this process. And right now, I have picked the steering committee. I had 24 people apply to participate in the steering committee. I had recommendations from the Planning Commission of how to pick people. I took those recommendations and I will read the people that received emails. They will be convening for the first time at the end of this month. And the members will include Earl Bloom, Michael Kelly, Bob Garden, Rob Slattery, Heather Gedra, Jeffrey Silgalski, Dennis Hahn, Steve Herbrick, Ed Zorn, Sue Grodick, Judy Bindis, Walter Parker, Denise Peening, Allison Raptor, Alice Miller, and Superintendent Mark Lykoff. We know of a couple things that outside entities are looking for as far as being involved in Brooklyn. One is the library. They're looking to expand, as well as the Metro Parks. We're a big void as far as trails and biking throughout Brooklyn in their Greenways plan. I have talked to both of those directors, and Glenn Coyne, who heads up the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. They will take part in this process as well as other stakeholders, but they will be one of the stakeholders that comes to a meeting to present to the steering committee about ways to use their objectives and build it into this master plan. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll now move on with director's reports. Just two this evening. The first we have is our Rec Manager, Ms. McGinty.
Good evening. The Brooklyn Recreation Department, in cooperation with the Brooklyn Police and the Fire Departments, will present Frightening Friday Night Howl-O-Scream Skate, Friday, October 19th during open skate from 8 to 9:15. Free admission to current Brooklyn residents with an ID, wearing a costume, and donating a Thanksgiving-related canned good for the City of Brooklyn Thanksgiving basket. All other skaters not wearing a costume will be admitted for regular admission rates. Skate rentals applies for all skaters. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Next up is our Finance Director, Mr. Raguse.
Thank you. To follow up on Council President Van Kirk's earlier remarks, we will be holding our first budget workshop with City Council for the capital budget on October 20th at 6 p.m. Please let me know if you would like anything to be included on the agenda that we have not talked about. And that's all for me tonight.
Thanks, sir. We'll now move on with legislation. We begin this evening with Ordinance 2018-74 is up for third reading adoption, amending Section 539.21 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Brooklyn to eliminate outright prohibition of begging in parks and playgrounds. Just to follow up, we talked about this when it was on first reading, but we received a letter from the ACLU saying that this portion of our ordinance or our laws was declared unconstitutional, that forbade people from asking for begging for assistance in the park, and so they've asked us to take that out, and that is what this ordinance does. It will correct that to put this in line with the Supreme Court's ruling. Did I get that correct, Mr. Butler?
I would say to bring our code in line with not only Supreme Court rulings, but also some circuit court rulings that have been handed down throughout the country.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
May I be recognized?
Yes.
Mr. Butler, could you please expand a little bit on that, and also let council know some of the other remedies we have at our disposal if there would be, for example, aggressive panhandling or anything that would cause a disturbance?
Sure, be glad to. I'll say that for several decades now, the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized that asking for money, panhandling, begging, asking for donations for nonprofit causes, all of those things are protected free speech under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So anytime a government is going to impose restrictions, such as the one that's before you, on free speech, protected free speech, the government has to show a compelling governmental interest in doing so. And in order to do that, the government has to place what are considered reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on that speech that are generally content neutral. So when governments try to restrict protected speech, such as panhandling, they've got to really leap over a very high burden in order to demonstrate that those restrictions are constitutional. In this case, this ordinance precedes any of our service in the government by several decades, many decades, I'm sure, and it outright prohibits any sort of begging in the parks. That is not a narrowly tailored time, place, and manner restriction on otherwise free speech. There are some narrowly tailored restrictions on free speech, including panhandling, such as, for example, stepping into the street and asking a motorist for money. That's outlawed under the state of Ohio code and can be enforced in Brooklyn and anywhere else in Ohio. Panhandling from a public street is illegal. There are also restrictions elsewhere in our code, for example, in the criminal trespass ordinance and in the disorderly conduct ordinance, that permit the police to enforce against folks who are acting aggressively and not permitting the proper flow of activity in a particular place, such as playing on a playground, or walking in the park, or walking on a sidewalk. So if a panhandler, for example, is acting aggressively, impeding traffic, regular pedestrian traffic or play, all of those things can be enforced under separate sections of our code. I will also say that I'm a little more comfortable with the repeal of this particular section of this ordinance, this phrase that is at the tail end of this ordinance, because the police indicate that there has not been historically any panhandling in the parks or playgrounds. And so I think we should all sleep comfortably knowing that the repeal of this section is not going to necessarily result in all of a sudden a rash of panhandlers on the playgrounds or the parks. And if for some reason that were to happen, we'd have other code provisions that we'd be able to use to prevent that. I hope that answers your question, Councilwoman.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep.
And he kept saying several decades ago, this ordinance was last amended in 1970. So we're looking at almost 50 years ago. All right, are there any comments or questions regarding it?
May we recognize?
Yes.
I've had conversations with Mr. Butler about this, and one of the things I pointed out was that as a city, we did not ban them citywide, even though, of course, we really don't particularly care to have panhandlers, that it was limited to the parks and playgrounds for a reason. And I understand that we really haven't had a problem with it. As a small community, though, the other side of this is if this is not repealed, basically we've been put on notice by the ACLU, and we certainly do not want to spend city resources on fighting a losing battle in court. So even though I don't think there's any one person up here who, would like to see panhandling in the park or the playground, it's just a losing battle because of court cases that have been decided, and it would be a waste of a lot of money for us to try and fight it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll make the motion that we adopt.
Second.
To adopt, Kevin Tansky.
Yes.
Art Politsky.
Yes.
Ron Van Kirk.
Excuse me, yes.
Meg Ryan Shaki.
Yes.
Andy Selhertz.
Yes.
Kathy Pucci.
Yes.
Next up is ordinance 2018-75. This is up for third reading adoption, authorizing an amended job retention and creation grant agreement with Inogen. I explained the details in my Finance Committee report. Are there any comments or questions regarding this? I'll make a motion that we
Move to adopt.
Second.
To adopt, Kevin Tansky.
Yes.
Art Politsky.
Yes.
Ron Van Kirk.
Yes.
Meg Ryan Shaki.
Yes.
Andy Selhertz.
Yes.
Kathy Pucci.
Yes.
The last two items this evening are on first reading. The first is Resolution 2018-8, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Cuyahoga County General Health District for health services for the year 2019 and 2020. And the second one is Resolution 2018-9, requesting the county fiscal officer to advance taxes from the proceeds of the 2018 tax levies pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, Section 321.34. That's already passed. All right, that is all for our agenda this evening. Does the mayor, any commissioners or directors or anyone else on council, anything else need to add?
Yeah, I just want to say something. I want to read something in the record. So, Councilwoman Kathy Pucci brought it up about the mounds in the back, whether they should be removed or whether they're not. I just want to bring up what 5 residents wrote to the school board and city council. Below listed residents of Rodone Road whose property backs into Hurricane Alley Field are requesting the removal of the unsightly mounds of dirt that was removed from the demolition of Rodone Elementary School 3 years ago. We were told back then that it would be taken care of, and yet 3 years later, still remain. Not only is it unsightly, but dangerous. As children are playing on those mounds, which I am told contain broken pieces of pipe, and at least in one instance, a truck parked on the top of the hill, top of one of the hills, which headlights were facing the back of the neighbor's property. And I'm looking at it this way: if that was my backyard and I had weeds 9 foot tall and mounds that high, and it used to be a nice green field back there where they used to either practice soccer, football, and to see that going on, and nothing's being done with the weeds, they just continue to grow, and the mounds are still there. They're saying there isn't a water issue, but I was there and I've actually seen it totally soaked behind that fence. So I know they have the sewer department out and everything else, but those mounds need to be taken down and put back the way that field was. Those residents should not have to look weeds 9 foot tall in the back of their yard when that used to be a nice green area. So however we want to look at it, when those schools were taken down, that dirt should have been hauled out of there, not piled high in front of somebody's backyard. That's where I got the problem. And I've gotten 5 signatures on this. Now, somebody had to promise those residents, I don't think that they're making this up. So, and I went back there and I don't like the way it looks to begin with. I remember when it was rode down that it was a nice field back there where they used to practice games. And that's all I have to say. That concludes my point.
May I be recognized?
Yes.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I think we're probably all in agreement that we want those mounds down. I was looking for clarification from the building commissioner's perspective if this was something the city could require or not, because in the beginning I think there was some question, and hopefully we're going to work through this and get them down. So I was not arguing to leave them there. I was looking for clarification that the city would have the authority to require that.
Right. No, I know you weren't arguing. I just wanted to read it in the record.
Thank you.
May I be recognized? So I just want to clarify for the city, we have the authority to have them remove it immediately. However, as I think Mr. Colsar said, in a nice way, we do have a partnership with the school. We would like to work with them. We understand their financial constraints right now with everything going on. So we are trying to work with them. They have been willing to have conversations. It's just probably not their first priority of things right now, and I will reach out again to Dr. Blackoff tomorrow.
And the only reason I brought it up, because the residents have contacted me again and asked me where this was sitting. So, but thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
To adjourn, Kevin Tansky?
Yes.
Barb Politzky?
Yes.
Ron Van Kirk?
Yes.
Meg Ryan Shaki?
Yes.
Andy Selhertz?
Yes.
Kathy Pucci?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed evening.